Good morning from the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, and this is your Access and Privacy Online News Summary for Saturday, March 15th. This week, while Canadian privacy and access issues remain at the forefront of our consideration, much of the attention is directed to the elephant south of the border. We do have a few Canadian stories, with a lot of U.S. coverage, including AI-powered child monitoring battles, escalating international disputes, and new concerns over access to personal data. Plus, we were at the 27th Annual Victoria International Privacy and Security Summit, and we'll bring you a snippet from our sit-down discussion with Commissioner Michael Harvey. As always, you can find the full stories via the links in the show notes or on our website. Let's dive in. As we mentioned in the introduction, flooding the zone is starting to create the intended consequences south of the border, and those impacts are being felt directly and indirectly in Canada. It is impossible to downplay the impact of the chaos on Canadians, and rightfully, Canadian news coverage is focused on attempting to follow the changes and provide answers to people about what it all means here, there, and around the world. Since its inception, this podcast initially identifies stories through predefined searches in Canadian press. This is the first week we only see 2 direct stories in CP directly relating to those searches. Almost all are U.S. stories. It's entirely understandable in the short term, but we will be vigilant to see if this becomes a trend. To start, from Jim Dumville, LGI reporter at the River Valley Sun. Newly uncovered documents reveal a massive diesel spill at an Irving station in New Brunswick. While the extent of the environmental damage remains unclear, the lack of public disclosure raises serious transparency concerns. Currently, CBC's fact-finding search indicates as much as 100,000 liters of diesel escaped from the storage tank into the surrounding environment. Initially detected in December 2024, the full scope only became apparent months later in information unveiled through Freedom of Information requests made by the CBC. When the spill first happened in December, it was confirmed the spill had contaminated the nearby Tim Hortons and the well-serving Murray's restaurant and Irving truck stop. The far-reaching impact of the cleanup and mitigation efforts continues to affect businesses and homeowners surrounding, with ongoing water testing of neighboring properties. Tim Hortons remains closed at this moment, while Murray's restaurant and the Irving gas bar reopened after a few days, using potable water trucked into the businesses. This event provides another important example that the full story may only emerge with Freedom of Information requests, particularly when holding corporations accountable. From Maggie McIntosh, LGI reporter at the Winnipeg Free Press. In another case of policy changes happening without public consultation, the Manitoba government has quietly canceled grade 10 provincial exams. Internal documents obtained by the Free Press via Freedom of Information show grade 10 tests are on pause amid a wider assessment review and redevelopment plan that's anticipated to take several years. The exams were introduced in 2023, but have been under fire for being rushed and disorganized. This decision, which was not publicly announced, raises concerns about transparency in educational policy, as Manitoba Education has quietly removed all information on the exams from its website without making an announcement. Many educators and parents are left questioning the province's decision-making process, emphasizing the need for accessible government information to maintain public trust. Local access to information remains critical, but the issue extends beyond Canada's borders. Across North America, AI-driven surveillance in schools is sparking growing debate and concern. A deep investigation by the Associated Press into AI surveillance in schools has raised serious privacy and security concerns. While schools claim AI tools help detect potential threats, critics argue that these systems disproportionately target marginalized students and lack accountability. On top of that, when the Seattle Times and the Associated Press partnered to investigate school surveillance, reporters received access to almost 3,500 sensitive, unredacted student documents through a records request. The report highlighted particular concern over how secure surveillance technology is and the risk it poses for LGBTQIA+ students specifically. The report also noted there's no independent research showing surveillance tech increases safety. From monitoring social media posts to tracking students' online behavior, The growing use of AI in schools raises fundamental questions about consent, data security, and the right to privacy for children. The investigation also found that these systems often flag false positives, leading to unnecessary disciplinary actions. This comes amid a broader debate over government transparency, where public records requests in the U.S. continue to reveal how AI surveillance is reshaping privacy rights. Beginning our shift to the impacts from the Trump presidency. With multiple outstanding requests for more information, the U.S. Commerce Secretary has confirmed new steel and aluminum tariffs are on the way, escalating economic tensions. The tariff on steel and aluminum would be 25%, and it was added Trump's most recent tariff threat against Canada's dairy and lumber exports would not take effect until April. Meanwhile, Ontario attempted to respond with its own measures, raising electricity export costs. While these moves are creating broader geopolitical impact, public access to information about the details surrounding these decisions remains limited. At the same time, U.S. labor unions have filed a lawsuit to prevent the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, led by Elon Musk, from accessing millions of Americans' Social Security data, citing privacy concerns. However, a federal judge in Washington, D.C., declined to block DOGE's access to Treasury systems containing sensitive personal information, stating insufficient evidence of immediate risk. Although they acknowledged the privacy concerns, they said DOGE is still limited by a different court order in New York. So far, DOGE's work during the early stages of the Trump administration has drawn nearly 24 lawsuits. The battle over access to information isn't just about trade. It's also at the heart of shifting political dynamics in Washington. Karen Oritz, the federal worker at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC, who became a whistleblower, determined to expose internal government failures. She received an email sent by Trump's team giving her the option to resign from their positions. Her alarm grew when her supervisor directed administrative judges in her New York district office to pause all their current LGBTQ+ cases and send them to Washington for further review. Oritz responded to this by emailing the acting EEOC chair, questioning their fitness to serve as acting chair, quote, much less hold a license to practice law, end quote. Her story is part of a broader pattern. Thousands of workers dismissed under the Trump administration are now appealing their terminations. Meanwhile, the fired head of a federal watchdog agency has announced he's ending his legal fight over his removal, signaling a shift in how government oversight functions. While those proceed, one federal watchdog, Hampton Dellinger, from the Office of Special Counsel, said he was dropping his case a day after the federal appeals court in Washington sided with the Trump administration in removing him as the head of the Office of Special Counsel. The Office of Special Counsel is an independent agency dedicated to guarding the federal workforce from illegal personnel actions. And separately, adding to the controversy, Georgetown Law's dean is pushing back against a federal prosecutor's warning about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, policies, highlighting the ongoing political battles over government accountability and transparency. The dean, William Trenner, told acting U.S. Attorney Ed Martin that the First Amendment prohibits the government from dictating what Georgetown's faculty teach or how to teach it. This isn't the first time prosecutor Ed Martin has used his office as a platform for parroting the political priorities of the Republican president who gave him the job in January. Martin is also the prosecutor who fired and demoted attorneys who prosecuted Trump supporters for storming the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. As tensions escalate in the U.S., international conflicts over information access and surveillance are also ramping up. In a diplomatic standoff, Russia has expelled 2 British diplomats over espionage allegations. Russia did not provide any evidence. London officials said this was not the first time that Russia has made malicious and baseless accusations against their staff. The UK responded in kind, expelling a Russian diplomat and a diplomatic spouse. These moves underscore the growing tensions between Western nations and Russia, where information access and intelligence leaks play a crucial role. And in similar spats involving the U.S., attorneys representing a Russian woman seeking to reclaim a seized mega yacht are now targeting the government of Antigua. The yacht was liquidated and sold by the government, but questions were raised about how the funds were being spent. Getting records has proven difficult for the attorneys as Antigua and Barbuda has a Freedom of Information Act. However, the Information Commissioner appointed last year has no physical office. Meanwhile, Albania has banned TikTok for a year, citing concerns over violence among children. The education minister said officials are in contact with TikTok on installing filters like parental control, age verification, and the inclusion of the Albanian language in the application. The cabinet initiated the move last year after a teen stabbed another teenager to death in November after a quarrel that started on TikTok. The decision reflects global anxieties about the influence of big tech on youth, particularly as governments grapple with regulating online platforms. On the corporate side, the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, has asked a judge to delay its antitrust trial against Amazon, citing resource constraints after losing employees. When asked if the agency's challenges were due to recent cuts in the federal government, a lawyer for the FTC said it was, adding that some employees chose to leave the FTC following the so-called fork-in-the-road email sent by DOJ in January. The Amazon trial has been scheduled to start in September. The request underscores the challenges regulators face in taking on tech giants, where financial power and legal complexity often stall enforcement actions. While international disputes and corporate battles dominate headlines, another issue is raising alarms with the weaponization of personal data and reproductive health. The Guttmacher Institute is a research and policy NGO that aims to improve sexual health and expand reproductive rights worldwide. They're back in the privacy fight, warning that state-mandated abortion reporting could do more harm than good. The concern? Personal health data could be used against individuals in politically charged legal battles. An Indiana anti-abortion group began using public records requests to obtain individual abortion reports from the state in 2022 and report on alleged violations by providers, including submitting the reports late. The state health department eventually declared that individual reports are not public records, because a ban on most abortions means so few happen that the reports could be used to reveal who's obtaining them. With some states tightening restrictions on reproductive rights, the risks of collecting and sharing sensitive health information are greater than ever. Advocates argue that strict data protection measures must be in place to prevent government overreach and protect individuals' privacy. The growing use of personal data by governments and corporations raises fundamental questions about privacy rights. Before we go, FIPA was at the 27th Annual Victoria International Privacy and Security Summit. We were in the room for BC Information Commissioner Michael Harvey's keynote address and are incredibly supportive of his calls for privacy law reform. We were also privileged to hold a fireside chat to release as an upcoming commentary. Here's a quick excerpt.
What I would say is there's definitely an increase in interest in privacy, and there's a thirst, I think, in this community to talk about privacy. I think this conference has over many years been, part of it is kind of the economics of holding this conference. There's a big security focus, but even the security folks, I think, are interested in the privacy stuff. Now, obviously, there's a clear overlap between these worlds, but I think there's I'm getting real interest in the privacy things that I want to talk about from people that I think are kind of hardcore security people, right? So I think these worlds are paying more attention to each other than they have in the past. It's one theme. On the privacy side, I've just came from two panels. One on the privacy concerns of seniors, and Indigenous data sovereignty. And so I think if this is a theme that I think that has been building in privacy circles for some time, but I think it's going to be really important for us in British Columbia, is to understand that privacy in a society is something that needs to be understood in all of its nuances, and that the abilities of individuals to defend their privacy rights, and I don't want to just put it as defend their privacy rights, but also to advance their privacy interests, right? So both a defensive and an offensive posture for people are not equal or equitable across society. And so a truly complex understanding of privacy in a modern society is one that considers the position that seniors are in. It considers, and we need to figure out, Indigenous data sovereignty and how and how really colonial society can support First Nations in their Indigenous data sovereignty aspirations, and also how we can make sure that we respect those principles for Indigenous people who may be interacting with the BC Public Service or corporations as well. So there's also been important panels on the privacy of children and youth, another group. So I think that seeing these panels, and these have been some of our most highly attended panels, are really important. So there's also, of course, as every conference the last couple of years, been a talk about AI, and I think we've got to figure that out. A lot of, and when I say figure that out, I think what I mean is that AI is becoming the mainstream, right? It is now so ubiquitous. I made the case this morning that we won't be talking about AI in 5 years. I actually mean that a bit facetiously. We I think will be talking about AI in 5 years. But the point is that now we talk about AI use cases. The machine learning, or what I call probabilistic computer, the way that computer programming works is just in general is fundamentally changing. From being deterministic to probabilistic, that's the essence of machine learning approach, and that changes everything because to have computer programming work in that way, to play the odds, that's a statistical. What I mean is statistical calculations, and you need to have data to perform the statistical calculations. You need to have lots and lots of it. And so that is figuring out the mainstreaming of AI, how AI, when I first started talking about this a few years ago, I said, well, we're talking about AI, and like at the time there was talk about using AI for utilities management and big use cases. And I said, well, what about the AI that's going to be embedded in my wireless earbuds, right? Like there's going to be AI in my smart fridge, right? There's going to be AI everywhere. And so figuring out how to deal with the mainstreaming of that, because there are huge privacy implications because of the data voraciousness of all that. That's, I think, another theme. So I think that's what I'd say are the main takeaways.
As always, we hope today's stories help you stay informed about the latest issues surrounding privacy, information management, and public transparency. Be sure to tune in this Wednesday when we bring you a sit-down interview with BC's Information and Privacy Commissioner, following his keynote at the VIPS conference. He'll share insights from his first months in office and discuss key privacy challenges moving forward. To help us keep the mics on, subscribe to FIBA News Monitoring or consider making a donation. Our writer is Sean Fisk. Original music for today's show was composed by The Mysterious, Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, your host and producer. Thank you for joining. A big FIBA thank you to all the contributors, reporters, and outlets that make this podcast possible, and to you, our listeners, who help keep this project alive. Stay safe and stay informed.